Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring this book, What Do You Do With Your Time? By Sunday Adelaja.
Ooh, very timely.
And I know we all struggle with this concept of time and time management. I mean, there are tons of books and gurus out there trying to sell us their latest productivity hack. But Adelaja has a really refreshing perspective. Have you had a chance to dig into the book?
Oh, yeah. He's got some really unique ideas about how to think about time, almost like a valuable resource that we need to refine.
I like that. It's like he's saying time is the new currency.
Yeah, more valuable than money, you could say. He actually compares it to crude oil, something valuable, but only when it's processed.
Like it has potential, but it needs to be converted.
Exactly, just like oil needs to be refined into gasoline or plastics or all sorts of useful products. He argues that we need to convert our time into valuable outputs to get the most out of it. Otherwise, it's just wasted potential.
So many of us run around feeling like we're constantly busy, but if we're not actually refining our time, are we really getting anything out of it?
Right, and he gives this great example in the book about this woman named Queen, a super successful engineer living in Canada. Great career, family, the whole 9 yards.
Sounds like she's got it all figured out.
From the outside, yeah. But she realized she was spending something like 15 to 20 hours a week just watching TV.
Wow. That's like almost another part-time job.
Exactly. It really highlights how we can let time slip away without even realizing it, especially with all the distractions we have today.
Think about how much time we spend scrolling through social media or binge-watching shows. Imagine if we could reclaim even a fraction of that time.
I know, I'd have like 3 more books read by now.
What could we achieve if we were more intentional with that time?
Adelaja breaks it down into 3 categories: wasting, spending, and investing. Wasting time like Queen's TV habit yields no real return. Spending time like working a job gives you a limited return like your salary. But investing your time, that's where the magic happens.
Investing time. Okay, now I'm really interested. What does that look like in practice?
It's about using your time to create things. Build skills, make a lasting impact that multiplies over time. Think of it like planting seeds that will grow into something much bigger, as opposed to just tossing those seeds away.
So it's about moving beyond just going through the motions and actually creating something tangible. I know Adelaja has some strong opinions about how people spend their time, even within a religious context.
He does. He uses this example of a guy named Perry who saw incredible personal growth after completing a focused 2-year church program.
So a structured program was really beneficial.
Exactly. And he contrasts this with other people who spend countless hours in various church activities, but without any real tangible outcome.
I can see where he's going with this. It's like he's challenging us to go beyond just checking boxes and actually make a difference, not just in a religious context, but in the world.
Actions speak louder than words, right?
Right. Speaking of action, Adelaja highlights Gary Vaynerchuk, this entrepreneur who's laser focused on achieving a specific goal, buying the New York Jets.
Oh yeah, Gary V. He's a great example of someone who strategically converts his time. From working in his family's liquor store to building his personal brand to launching VaynerMedia, every step has been a calculated investment.
That's some serious dedication. He even chose to skip out on a lot of the typical fun young adults have in their 20s to focus on building his business.
He understands that every hour counts. And it ties back to Adelaja's point that humans are inherently driven to create and produce.
We're all creators at heart.
He draws parallels with athletes like Michael Jordan and Pete Sampras, who dedicated their lives to honing their craft. It's about recognizing and nurturing that desire to create.
So how do we actually harness that energy? How do we convert our time into something valuable? Give us the good stuff.
Well, Adelaja gets really specific. He personally dedicates 3 hours every single day to learning and skill development.
3 hours, that's a pretty big chunk of time.
He calls it his personal laboratory.
A lab for the mind. I love it. But realistically, not everyone can dedicate that much time every day.
Right. And he's flexible about it. It's not about the specific number of hours, but the intentionality. Creating dedicated time for learning and growth, even if it's just 30 minutes.
So it's about making that commitment to yourself.
Exactly. Treating it with the same importance as any other appointment. And remember those time wasters we talked about. Adelaja is a big proponent of eliminating those sneaky time thieves.
Time thieves, huh? I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Think excessive phone calls, pointless meetings, even social obligations that leave you feeling drained. They steal our precious hours.
Oh yeah. It's so easy to get caught up in those things. But work, family, life, How do we find the time to create valuable products when we're already juggling so much?
Well, Adelaja actually uses this really interesting example. Have you ever heard of Frederick McKinley Jones?
Can't say I have.
He was this incredible African-American inventor who revolutionized the transportation of perishable goods. Basically, he invented the refrigerator.
Wow, that's a game changer. But how does inventing refrigerators connect to converting time?
Jones didn't just work a typical 9 to 5. He was constantly experimenting, pushing boundaries. He understood that time was precious. It needed to be invested wisely.
So he was intentional about how he used his time.
Exactly. And his inventions had a lasting impact on the world. It's about having that vision, breaking it down into steps, and consistently working on it.
So working hard, but also working smart, making the most of every moment.
Adelaja emphasizes that conversion is an ongoing process. Evaluating your routines, identifying areas to improve, making conscious choices about how you spend your time.
So it's not a one-time thing, it's about constantly refining your approach.
He even suggests being mindful of those small moments throughout the day and asking yourself, what is the consequence of what I am doing right now?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Holding yourself accountable.
It makes you think twice about those mindless activities that can suck up your time.
We're almost out of time for this part of the deep dive, but before we move on, can you give us a little preview of what's coming up?
Absolutely. In the next part, we'll delve deeper into Adelaja's personal conversion method. Those 3 hours he dedicates to learning and development. We'll unpack his approach and give you practical tips for maximizing your own time.
Sounds great. Can't wait to hear more. So, we were just talking about personal time management, and I'm curious, does Adelaja only focus on individual productivity, or does he apply these ideas to larger groups as well?
Oh, he definitely takes it further. One of the most interesting points of the book is where he applies this whole idea of time conversion to churches.
Churches. Okay, now that's intriguing.
Yeah, he challenges this traditional idea of, just spending lots of time in passive activities at church. And he really pushes this idea that churches should be more focused on equipping people to create tangible value, in the world.
So it's not just about showing up on Sundays and calling it good. He's suggesting that churches should be more action-oriented.
Yeah.
Like workshops for making a difference.
Yeah, exactly. He believes they should be intentional about providing practical training and resources that empower people to live productive lives, lives with purpose. He even goes so far as to say that, even if the work you're doing isn't explicitly religious, doing meaningful work in the world can be a more impactful way to live out your faith than just passive church attendance.
It's like he's redefining what it means to serve a higher purpose. Not just singing hymns and listening to sermons, but using your talents to make an actual difference in the world.
Yeah, he really emphasizes that impact part. He uses this example of this guy named Ola, I think, who works weekends, so he can't always attend traditional church services.
Makes sense. Lots of people have non-traditional schedules.
But, Ola really prioritizes his personal relationship with God and focuses on his work, and Adelaja sees that as a valid way to live out his faith. Finding what works for you, aligning your actions with your values.
It's about taking ownership of your time, making choices that lead to real growth and fulfillment. This conversation is making me think about all the time I spend mindlessly scrolling through social media.
Oh, there you go. A perfect example of what Adelaja calls a time thief.
Time thief.
He highlights how all these seemingly harmless activities, like phone calls, social obligations, entertainment, they can really steal our time and prevent us from achieving our goals.
Okay, so we need to be on the lookout for those time thieves. But realistically, how do we find the time to create valuable products when we're already juggling so much?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. Well, Adelaja actually uses this really fascinating example. You familiar with Frederick McKinley Jones?
I don't recognize the name.
He was this brilliant African-American inventor who revolutionized the way we transport food. He basically invented the refrigerator.
Wow, that's huge. But how does that tie into converting time?
Jones didn't just work a 9 to 5, he was constantly experimenting, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. And he understood that time was precious. It needed to be invested wisely.
So he was intentional about how he used his time.
Yeah.
He had a clear vision.
Exactly. And his inventions ended up having a lasting impact on the world. And it's a great example of, having a vision, breaking it down, working on it consistently.
Working hard, but also working smart.
Right. And Adelaja really emphasizes that conversion is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process, It's about constantly evaluating your routines, identifying areas where you can improve, making conscious choices.
Always striving to get better.
Exactly. He even suggests being mindful of those small moments throughout the day, asking yourself, what is the consequence of what I'm doing right now?
That's such a good question. It really makes you think about how you're spending your time.
Yeah, holding yourself accountable. And that brings us back to Adelaja's point about our inherent human desire to create. He reminds us that the act of creation is inherently rewarding,
Like the feeling you get after finishing a challenging project or learning a new skill. It's so satisfying to take your time and effort and turn it into something real.
Right. He uses the example of Michelle, the writer. She meticulously schedules and prioritizes her writing time. She treats it like her job, even though, it's not her main source of income.
She recognizes its value.
Exactly. She understands that in order to produce something valuable, you have to make time for it.
So we're all entrepreneurs of our own time.
Right. I love that. We have this valuable resource, and we can either invest it wisely or squander it away. It's our choice.
Well said.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question now is, how do we become better investors of our time? What are some practical steps we can take?
That's a great question. And that's something we're going to delve into in the next part of our deep dive. We're going to unpack Adelaja's personal conversion method and give you some concrete strategies for maximizing your time.
Looking forward to it. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of Adelaja's personal conversion method. Those 3 hours he sets aside each day. What exactly does he do during that time?
It's fascinating. He calls it his personal laboratory. Not a real lab, of course, but that dedicated time he carves out for focused learning and growth.
So it's like a mental gym.
Exactly. He spends those 3 hours immersing himself in materials that will generate wisdom and fuel his thinking, Books, lectures, conversations with people he admires.
It sounds intense, like a mental boot camp.
It's about pushing yourself, right? He compares it to scientists experimenting, constantly pushing the boundaries of knowledge.
But 3 hours, that's a lot. Is that even realistic for most people?
Well, he acknowledges that not everyone can dedicate that much time every day. The key is intentionality. Even if you can only spare 30 minutes or an hour, make it a dedicated time block for learning.
So it's more about being consistent than the actual number of hours.
Exactly. Treat it like an important appointment. Make that commitment to yourself. And here's how he structures it. He focuses on 3 main areas: studying the Bible, immersing himself in books and materials from inspiring leaders, and actively training himself in areas where he wants to grow.
Bible study makes sense for a pastor. But those inspiring leaders, hey, who's he learning from? Any names he drops?
He doesn't name names, but he talks about seeking wisdom from leaders across different fields: business, politics, history, even other pastors who are doing amazing things.
So looking beyond his immediate circle, getting inspiration from diverse sources.
Exactly, learning from the best no matter what field they're in. And then there's this concept of training himself.
What does that even mean?
He talks about identifying your weaknesses, the areas where you need to grow, and then seeking out resources and experiences that can help you bridge the gap.
So like taking a proactive approach to personal development.
Exactly. And another thing he emphasizes is being mindful of what you consume.
You mean like the information you feed your mind?
Yes. The books you read, the podcasts you listen to, even the conversations you have. All of that shapes your thinking.
It's like choosing a healthy diet for your mind. You don't want to fill it with junk.
Exactly. He shares this story about a woman named Vicky who grew up surrounded by gossip and negativity. And she realized that it had affected her whole outlook on life, made it hard for her to trust people.
That's tough.
So she made a conscious effort to surround herself with positive, uplifting people and started reading books that promoted growth and optimism, basically retraining her mind.
It's amazing how much power we have to shape our thoughts and beliefs.
It all starts with being mindful of what you consume. And Adelaja is big on guarding your time, being selective about social engagements, limiting phone calls, putting his phone away to minimize distractions.
Setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Protecting that focused time.
Right. It's not about isolating yourself, but being intentional with your time and energy. Remember that Warren Buffett quote: "The difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything."
So true. You can't do it all. You have to be selective. But when we are talking about converting our time, what should we be focusing on creating? Any specific guidance there?
He stresses that it depends on your individual talents and passions. What are you uniquely good at? What lights you up? He uses the example of Richard Branson, who builds businesses, Joel Houston, the musician, and Usain Bolt, the athlete. All successful in different ways.
So it's not about comparing yourself to others, but finding your own path.
Find your strengths and create products that align with them. He encourages us to think big, like how Hollywood studios plan their movie releases years in advance. Be strategic. Create products that can make an impact.
Leave your mark on the world.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. Keep learning, keep growing, keep refining your approach.
It's about that continuous improvement. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want listeners to take away?
Your time is precious. Don't let it slip away. Invest it wisely. Convert it into something meaningful, something that aligns with your purpose and passions.
Powerful advice. I know I'm feeling inspired to take action. So, to all our listeners out there, go out there and make the most of your time. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.